Great old classic, really classic choice there.
Summer of '69, I
Summer of
remember it
'69,
well.
yeah.
You would have been about 25.
Oh, I think I said 12. And now then, I'm going to talk about what I'm christening RoboManager. I don't know, have we all worked in big companies?
Yes.
Or at some point, we've been in a big company. I don't know whether you've all thought, why did he get that job? He's the least likely. We used to have a saying, which was, who's the least likely person to fill those shoes? And that'll be the one that gets the job. Now, all based on bias and not objectivity. Well, this headline, where did I get it from? The Guardian. Should big data analytics decide whether you get promoted? And apparently, guess who? Google, HR teams, they, from what I can tell, they put data on people's performances into their algorithm. The algorithm churns through and it decides, based on that and that alone, whether you get promoted, rewarded, and so on. Takes all that bias out of it. Now David is shaking his head. They're thinking, no, you can't do that. You could, surely.
Of course, I think in certain roles, I think if you're in a role where, well, I would say something like a call centre, where it's very obvious the statistics on calls and results and actions coming from those things, I think it's clear, yes, you can manage people by statistics. But there are plenty of, going back to graphic designers that we were talking about earlier on, I don't think you can measure a graphic designer by statistics on a computer.
I'm going to argue with you there, if I may.
Fair enough.
Because if a graphic designer's done some work, you can look at the feedback on that work, you can quantify how successful it was, if they've generated a radio advert, how many listens it got, how many if it's something on YouTube,
I appreciate
how many views it got.
We used to measure our PR agents by their column inches.
Yep.
Yes, okay. I
We've already agreed size is not important. Okay.
David,
I can see that, but creativity in the end is down to an opinion, and if we take maybe this graphic designer is something that can fall on either side of the argument, but if you need an opinion that's more objective, a computer can't give that.
No, I would disagree. I think a subjective,
right?
subjective opinion. But should a subjective opinion be determining who gets promoted, or should it be objective? I've been through recruitment processes in a large organisation. I've been on the interview panel and at the scanning CVs to decide who gets an interview stage, the person's name and photograph and age and all of those things are all taken away so that you are purely objective. So am I not behaving like a computer algorithm then? Could a computer algorithm not do it?
Remember, as it says in here, remember what Dale Carnegie noted, which was that when dealing with people, let's remember we're not dealing with creatures of logic. We're dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity. And they're going to decide what measures you use and how you interpret them.
And I think that's the key. It's the interpretation of those measures in the end that decides the result.
Yeah, but that interpretation is a thought process, and you think things through, and they don't look the part, but they spoke nicely, and they were well groomed, and this negative and that positive, and you balance out all those things with the person spec and the job spec, and you make a decision as to who you think should get the job. And I think that given clever enough computers and clever enough algorithms, I think there's a lot of circumstances when computers could do that.
I can see
that.
Well,
you said that. There's a lot of circumstances implying that there are many that you can't know. Not all.
Yeah, but also I think if you're in a smaller business, you might not have meaningful enough volume of statistics to actually make it relevant. In a big scale where there's lots of information going into the algorithm, lots of activity, lots of result data, then absolutely.
Okay, so let's look at, I'm sure there was a film about this, let's look at the fairly important global job of President of the United States of America. How about if we just pump everybody's data in the system and let a computer decide who's the best person to be president? Would that be a good plan?
I don't
My
think
goodness,
so.
I don't think so. But then, isn't it whoever's got the most money? Isn't that another way of? Isn't that what happens in America?
Wow.
So isn't that a statistical analysis of wealth?
That certainly influences voting.
A more sort of practical point there, a more relevant point is I know in recruitment, I don't know whether you two know this, but there seems to be a saying from the recruiters I've met, people, professionals like yourself, Dave, that you look at whether somebody can do, whether they've got the skill, whether they will do, then you start to think about, will they do what they're capable of? And then finally, I'm told the most important, will they fit?
Yes, I think
and that's not an algorithm-driven thing.
No, and I think the old, Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, I think the vast majority of a hiring decision in the end is, can you get on with this person? I mean, you'd be going down a strange route if you really did hire somebody you couldn't get on with. And I think the vast majority of bosses hire somebody, certainly in an environment where it's open plan, which is very common in offices these days, and you're working with people day by day, it's more likely to be that personality click. But there are an awful lot of businesses these days where somebody sits in a cubbyhole and doesn't interact with somebody, so it doesn't always have to be that way.
And as they'll often say on Dragon's Den, I love your business idea, but I couldn't work with you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's good enough for them to be out.
Well, I think
exactly.
the other point we also need to reflect on is that some of the people here that mentioned employ an awfully large number of people.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why, for example, small businesses do well, in my opinion, is there's a lot of women in them, and they're good multitaskers. And if you work in a smaller business, 250 down,
the
you
myth
need
of
to be a good
multitasking.
multitasker.
Okay, let's not get into multitasking because we need a whole program for that one.
It's a hot spot for
I
me.
think one important point to make, though, we talk about multitasking and things like that, but actually, to me, emotional intelligence, that ability to engage with an individual at any level, is a key thing.
Absolutely.
And
I agree.
you can be a really tough cookie in the business world, but you actually have that charismatic ability to engage with people, and actually everybody likes you, even though you are very tough in terms of perhaps some of the decisions and things that you have to make, and it's often those people that really do motivate people to work with.
And when you're looking at RoboManager,
RoboManager,
HR manager, whatever it is, I would expect a company doing that kind of thing to have 360-degree reviews, so into that algorithm can go what everybody thinks of this person.
Yes, indeed. I was going to say EQ. If the listener's interested, go and read Daniel Goleman's original work, because he did the surveys and produced a lot of information to show that the IQ level of senior boards, it was the board members very often who had a higher IQ than the managing director or CEO, but he had a very high EQ, emotional quotient. You could measure that. We have now got instruments that will measure you, and that could go in. If your EQ is high, raises your score.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just to finish off, you mentioned the Pareto rule. I knew it was in here somewhere. Talking about employees' career success doesn't depend on doing a good job, but it depends on being evaluated favourably by your manager.
Absolutely.
And what employees want is positive, not accurate feedback. The desire to be appreciated trumps our capacity for self-awareness every time. If we measured actual performance, Pareto would tell us 20% of the individuals would account for 80% of our productivity.
I 100% agree with that.
Right, so 80%, right.
I think many businesses, many leaders in businesses have heard exactly that thing over the years. I mean, it's not a new statistic, and I think it's very, very common. I've seen it myself driving salespeople, that the top people bring the most results to the business. They also cause some other challenges too. Top people quite often bring an ego that actually is difficult to manage, and there's also a school of thinking where maybe you need to be more average.
Never want to be more average.
Right. We are going to conclude.
It's that time.
And so we want to say...
Where did an hour and a half